From the BBC, this is the UK's home of live news and live sport. 5 Live.
With Anita Anand. So, we're talking about reasonable and unreasonable neighbourly behaviour. This all on the back of a couple who've complained about their neighbours because they say their cigarette smoking is getting into the neighbouring house. It's a nuisance, it stinks, and they want the council to do something about it. So, first of all, I want to know your reaction to that. Is that fair enough? And secondly, are there other behaviour patterns which are getting on your nerves from next door? 85058, Anita at bbc.co.uk. Let me tell you who we've got with us. We've got Neil Rafferty, who's from the Scottish branch of the smokers' rights group Forest. Thomas Lane is with us, technical editor of Building magazine. And also, we are going to hear from a very interesting man. I've sort of mentioned what he did before the news and sport. Andrew Cross is from Answers Detective Agency, which runs checks on neighbours for potential buyers. Hello there, Andrew.
Hi there.
And I bet you've uncovered some pretty disgusting things, have you, in your time?
Certainly have, yeah.
Right, OK. Well, just before we get to your disgusting things, let's go to Barney Chowdhury, because it does seem as if this problem does really strike a chord with many of you listening, because I've got this here. First of all, cigarette smoke from neighbours is a major problem, says Adam, let me tell you. Passive smoking is a serious problem. What can people do who suffer this? I do, and I'm sick of it, writes another listener. Cyril from Swindon says we've had this problem for years. It doesn't come through the walls. It gets into the cavity. It comes up through the floorboards. Something must be done. I mean, that pretty much matches your description, doesn't it, Thomas Lane, of these little pockets of unpleasantness that exist. So, Barney Chowdhury is our reporter. You've been looking into this. What can you do if your neighbours are stinky?
Well, you can't go to the council. I rang up a couple of them in my area, in the Midlands, and one of them said even if they had the power, they wouldn't intervene. And second of all, they said to me, well, we can't intervene anyway. There's nothing. It's not a commercial property. It's a private matter between neighbours. So that's the first thing. So you've got to look for other ideas and alternatives, really. So I drove to Bedworth in Warwickshire and spoke to a guy called Dean Starkey. He runs the Acorn Pest Control shop there, and I asked him what I should do.
Well, they say there's a load of things on the market now. You can buy air fragrances, air guard, which is such things as what we put into the toilets and other rooms in hotels, pubs, clubs and everything else, which they can buy from anywhere basically now.
So these are sort of canisters that you see in toilets?
Yeah, you basically see them on the TV as well. Ours is just like that because we do commercial side of it, and ours a little stronger than what you see on the telly, like Airwick, which is exactly the same thing.
Okay, so you've got a white box there, and it just sprays out.
It's just basically what you do. You open it, you put your canister in there. It's got preset times on them: 7.5 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. How you want it set in, or you can buy the digital ones, which you can put your own times in. I mean, there's 16 different fragrance. Do you want to look in the counter?
I'll look at that in a minute. I'm just more interested in the actual smell of this. What do? You push a button?
No, it's pre-charged. It's basically what you switch it on, then you do what you have to do.
Does it make a noise?
Yeah, it makes a little squirty noise that comes out.
Ooh.
Lovely.
What's that smell?
That's baby powder.
Baby powder?
Yeah.
What other smells do you have?
Oh, we've got orange burst, island mango, pina colada.
Pina colada?
Yeah. Yeah, and it smells like the drink as well.
Now, you use this at home. What flavours do you use?
Apple. Yeah, Mrs. likes the apple ones. So all our rooms have got apple flavours going through it. Okay, now
you do pest control. You actually go into places. What's the smelliest smell that you've had to deal with?
Mainly, it's if you're going into pubs, hotels, or anything like that, it's the men's toilets, which are the smelliest
and
ones.
They are reeking, aren't they?
They can be at the times, yeah. And the best one to do then is what they call is odour neutraliser, which basically gets rid of all them kind of smells. It is if it's in confined spaces. You know, if it's in a big, large space, you need more, sprays going out. So you can put more machines in. Smaller places you might only need just the one.
So something like this would get rid of almost any smell?
Not every smell, but a lot of the natural smells. You know what I mean? Smoke and everything else like that, it normally does.
Dean Starkey, thanks ever so much indeed. I think I'm going to try your cinnamon.
Cinnamon? You want a cinnamon one?
Marvellous.
So there we go, that's Barney Chowdhury gagging for his next assignment from the sound of things. So I want to know what your neighbours do and how you deal with it. 85058, Anita at bbc.co.uk is where we are. As I say, Andrew Cross from Answers Detective Agency. Are bad smells on the list of things that you present in your little dossier to would-be home buyers and say, look, actually don't move in with them. They are in the words of Jade Goody, they're minging. So don't do it.
I wouldn't say bad smells are on the top of the list. There's only a certain amount that we can do as far as getting particularly close to somebody's potential new home. What we tend to look for is we would tend to go there, say, on a Friday evening and a Saturday evening. Whether or not there's groups of lads racing their cars up and down the street. When people are shown round their houses, they generally tend to be shown round at a fairly quiet time of day. And of course, all sorts of things happen when the sun goes down. So you could end up that your local pub that looks quite inviting for a Sunday lunch turns into a riot on a Friday night, and people sort of tend to use your front garden as a toilet or a quick stopover kip spot or something. So we tend to try and put that over in the report more than the smells, although certainly if we've noticed that there's a lot of rubbish around and graffiti, those kinds of things, then we would obviously write that down as well.
Right. Stay with us. We've got lots of calls on the smoking issue in particular, and people getting quite upset in both directions, frankly. One here says, for heaven's sake, a gun going off and smoking, totally different. The gun going off is just noisy and irritating. Smoking is carcinogenic. I choose not to die of cancer. Thank you very much. So let's ask our friend from Forest to comment on that. Neil Rafferty, people saying actually, it's more than an irritation. It's a danger to health and welfare.
Oh, it's just nonsense. It really is. This is the problem with the anti-smoking sort of agenda now, that people are genuinely scared whenever they even hear about cigarette smoke. If you're in a really, really busy pub that's full of cigarette smoke, the risks of getting any kind of passive smoke-related illnesses are very, very small. If you've got a tiny little bit of smoke that's somehow seeping into your house through God knows what means, the risks to your health are absolutely non-existent, and people have got to understand this. They're being conned by these anti-smoking fanatics into believing that the slightest bit of cigarette smoke is going to kill them, and it's just drivel.
Right, well, let's take a call on this. Dave has called us from Basket. Hello, Dave.
Hi.
Hi there. Now, you're somebody who feels quite similarly that it's your house, you can do what you want to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't smoke at work anymore, working in Scotland now. So that's, we've got to go outside, and obviously you can't do that and, mess about with your work time. So the one last place I've got is my house.
Yeah, but Dave, what if you lived next to the lovely Adja, right? Now, Adja's an ex-smoker, so you know what they're like. They're quite sort of stroppy about all this. And,
I do.
What if your smoke was clawing its way around her good self? Surely she has the right to live in a clean environment. She wants to. She doesn't want your smelly smoke coming into her house.
Surely her house should not allow that smoke in.
Well,
in the first place.
Let's ask our building expert about this, because whose fault is it? As a technical editor of Building Magazine, could you turn round to somebody who's complaining about odours coming in and say, well, actually patch up your walls and sort out your cavities, and you're the one who's in charge, and you can sort it out yourself?
Well, I suppose ultimately the responsibility may be down to you if this sort of thing bothers you. Really what else you can do? You can complain to your neighbour. They're probably going to say, go away, I'm not going to stop smoking. So the onus is on the person who's suffering to actually try and address the problem, which I think could be very, very difficult.
But somebody was saying earlier that the smoke was coming up through the floor. I mean, lots of people live in flats now, especially in urban areas, and the floor-to-floor thing is a real problem, whether it's noise. Well, noise is a major one, isn't it? People walk sounding like they're elephants over your head. But so what about this sort of, how can you stop noise and smoke seeping through floors?
Are we building rubbish accommodation at the moment with very thin walls and very thin floors, where we're just actually designing houses to irritate the living daylights out of new buyers?
Well, I suspect the problem with the floors it relates to properties, Victorian properties, which have been converted from a house into flats.
Right.
And they were never really intended to be completely separate from the rooms below. And then, of course, you will get smoke or noise or anything permutating up through the floorboards.
So what can people do?
Well, I guess what you should try and do is put down a layer over the top of the floorboards, probably a layer of thin plywood. You'd have to screw it down, and you'd have to actually use a sealant to seal all the joints.
What if you're the neighbour underneath and you've got somebody yomping over your head? What can you do?
Noise is quite a difficult one to deal with. You could ask your neighbour nicely if they mind putting a carpet down. That might help.
I wonder about the asking neighbours nicely. Because Dave, what if Adja, right? She's tried everything. She's filled up her cavities, and she's put down thicker carpet, and she's done all of the things that a responsible person should do. But she's banging on your door saying, "Dave, please, I can't breathe anymore. It's horrible." Would you tell her to just sling a hook? Would you tell her that?
No. Well, the first thing you should realise is I'm actually a foundation designer. and we do a lot with the building industry, and there are ways of sealing out, because you can seal out methane gas from your basement or wherever it comes from. There are sealants you can use that would not allow smoke to go through. So that is not a problem at all. It just needs sorting out. People need to realise what they can get hold of, how they can use it, and literally it's a case of stapling it to your wall.
Right, okay, so basically you'd say redesign the house, I'm still smoking. Dave, thank you very much for your call. 0500 909 693. Lots of complaints about neighbours tonight. This one here, the worst thing about my neighbour, she keeps hens in her garden. The noise, the smell, it's dreadful in summer, so disgusting. Can't go in the garden, says Kim. Another one here, any person who owns a dog is a bad neighbour. Dog owners should not live less than 5 miles from other people, says Peter in Nottingham. Can I just ask both of you, have you had such experiences where you would gladly leap over a fence and do something dreadful to someone who really should be the closest human being to you, geographically and emotionally?
Well, yes. When I first moved to London, I was living in a variety of locations. I had a neighbour who, I don't know why, but decided to take a chainsaw to his own house and hack it about and then set fire to it. So that was one of my neighbours. I also had a neighbour who was a crack dealer, so we had a variety of machetes and guns.
Do you want to name the area and just watch the house prices plummet by the minute? Where was this?
This is South London.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So for example, would you go around and say, "Excuse me, could you please stop dealing crack? Because it's just upsetting."
No, I don't think I would. No.
What about you, Russ?
The lady who had the house in which I'm now. The neighbours were very pleased when we moved in, for the reason being that she supplied, this is true, all the local Chinese restaurants. And so the cooking smells were 24 hours a day. She never stopped. So much so that when I moved in, I had a £5,000 gas bill, which they tried to land with me, which I did rather argue with them. They said, "Oh no, Mr. Kane, there is a mistake. It's actually £8,000. But it was extraordinary. But they were very pleased when she moved. I mean, non-stop, 24 hours a day, cooking round the clock.
85858, Anita at bbc.co.uk. Andrew Cross, our private detective. What are the weirdest things that you've been asked to look into and that you found?
One of the weirdest ones, I mean, when people phone up, you've got to sort of gauge whether or not you're prepared to take money from them, because you may feel a little bit sorry for them. Perhaps they're not in a completely stable sense of mind. A particular one that I thought of earlier that reminded me of how amusing it can be sometimes. A lady contacted us trying to establish that our next door neighbour had somehow managed to train the local garden birds to defecate on her washing that was hanging out to dry in the back of her garden. I mean, short of taking a shotgun round there and dealing with it ourselves, we decided to decline the offer of looking into that, simply because the gentleman who spoke earlier about the complaint of shotgun noises, we didn't want to cause any more disturbance to the other neighbours.
Don't farmers have many issues that
they do,
we wouldn't normally think of? Yeah,
they certainly do. Even though they have a large amount of land, they tend to particularly hate their neighbours. A couple of instances we've dealt with where a neighbouring farm, the bull was leaping the fence and having intercourse with the dairy cows in the next field. And of course, this farmer was getting to the point where he was actually going to kill this bull. So, we had to talk to him quite nicely and kind of smooth it out, but that was more of a PR relation than anything else. Quite local to sort of where I live. I mean, certainly you've got sort of celebrities like Madonna, for example, who's moved into a nice area where people have enjoyed walking for sort of hundreds of years, and all of a sudden she's complaining that people are within 20 miles of the border of her land, even though she's used to having hundreds of thousands of people crowding around her and paying her wages.
Well,
basically.
I mean, if Madonna, you want to get in touch and tell me why all your neighbours are getting on your nerves, that's fine too. 85058, Anita at bbc.co.uk. Let's take a call.